For pan pizza, whether focaccia or Sicilian style, you want to line the pan with baking parchment. But if making Detroit style pizza, where you have like a 2-inch side wall like this, you don't have to line it. What you do instead is you grease the pan and the side walls with equal parts olive oil and melted butter, and you melt the butter first, then you add the oil and set it aside to cool, and then it will thicken. Otherwise, you'll generously grease the pan with this butter oil mixture, or just use oil if you prefer. Remembering also to grease the inside walls. This is important, the inside walls, so that you can get the pizza out, and then place the pre-weighed dough into the center of the pan. And one recipe will make 12 by 18 focaccias or Sicilian pizzas, but it will also make a number of Detroit style pizzas depending on the size of the pan. And I've got a few pans here to show you. A dough weight chart based on the pan size is provided in the class downloads. I've used up all my Detroit style pans and I've already greased them, but I want you to see what I call my butter paste, which is half melted butter and half olive oil. It's still very liquid, but when it gets cold, it will firm up like shortening, which helps to anchor the dough in place. So what you would do is you would grease your pan, and this is a larger pan than we're using today, so this is just for demonstration purposes. But the idea is you brush this oil mixture and butter to cover both the bottom of the pan, but also the side walls. And I'm using just any kind of a pastry brush, and I'm going to get the side walls. I just want to make sure I get plenty of grease in here because we want to be able to get this out of the pan. That's what I did with these pans. So this is what it looks like. Right now it's just still very liquidy, but when I put it in the fridge, this is going to get hard. Now, this was the same butter paste. After I greased these pans, I put the pre-measured size of dough, the pre-weighed piece of dough, in the pan. This is about 8 ounces of dough in a pan that is 6 by 9. And this is 6 by 6. And so this pan doesn't take as much dough. It's about 5 ounces of dough. But I greased the dough first, put a piece of the pan pizza dough, which is very soft, as you remember, in here. And then I'm going to put a little of this grease on my fingertips, and I'm going to dimple it. And so it takes a few dimplings. Sometimes you have to let it rest like 20 minutes between dimplings. But what you do is you go with your fingertips and you dimple the dough. Now, I put this dough in the pan actually yesterday, so it's had a long time to relax, so it's really ready to go. And you can see as I'm dimpling it, it's filling the pan all the way to the corners. And so this dough is now ready to go to the next stage. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. This is the bigger one. And we're going to dimple it. Always start from the center, go to the outside. If you have an air pocket, just break it. And dimple it, constantly guiding the dough. Don't push it, don't force it. Just guide it to fill the corners. Now, if the dough shrinks back because it's elastic and it's tense, just let it rest for 20 minutes, come back and dimple it again. When you're ready, this dough can then be either used to make a Detroit-style pizza after it rises, or you can do what I'm about to do, which is to embed some cheese in it. So I've got some cheeses that I've made, and I've cut these into cubes as opposed to shredding them because this pizza takes longer to bake than a regular pizza. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes, and I don't want the cheese to burn. So I'm using bigger pieces. Now, the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to put a little bit of the Parmesan, or you can also use Romano, around the edge of the dough, because as the dough rises, we want to get some of that cheese to kind of create a cheese, kind of a cheese cracker around the edge. I might even have some cheddar cheese for this. We've got our dry cheese there because that'll kind of crisp up and make a cheese cracker. And then I've got some regular either mozzarella, or you could use cheddar, or you could use provolone like I have here, and you can put it around the edge, and as the dough rises in the pan, it will create a little bit of a border. Once again, I'm going to dimple this. I'm going to put a little bit of this dry cheese around the edges. Now this dough still has 4 hours of rising ahead of it. So what we're trying to do now is embed some of this cheese in the dough itself as it rises. This is a technique I developed. It's not one that came from the pizzerias, even though Sean Randazzo was famous for his Detroit-style pizzas. He hadn't tried this technique, and it was one of the things that we had talked about him doing. I was going to work with him on learning how to make this technique when, unfortunately, he passed away. So now we've got this, and now in addition to that, I'm going to put some chunks of cheese, and it's only about half the total cheese that's going to go on this pizza. I'm going to put it on the surface so that when this dough rises, and I'm going to use a couple different kinds here so that you can see, the cheddar is nice because you can actually see the contrast of it with the other cheeses, that this cheese will get embedded in the dough and give you a very nice cheese crust. So we've got some more, a little bit of cheddar here. You don't need a lot. It's just half the cheese that's going to go in the chart. You'll see how much cheese each pizza calls for based on the size of the pan. And everybody has different pans. And if you don't have these Detroit-style pans, you can use a brownie pan. You can use a cake pan. It can even be round. It doesn't have to be square. There's lots of different ways that you can do. I'm going to put a little bit more cheese here. Okay, I'm going to save some cheese now for the top later. So what happens is this dough needs, from this point on, you start the clock. And it takes 4 hours at room temperature for this dough to rise and surround this cheese and embed it. So let me show you one that I've had sitting out for 4 hours that has already been rising and embedding the cheese. This dough is very bubbly compared to this. It's doubled in size, even though it's hard to tell because these are such tall walls. But the cheese that I put around the edge has kind of been gathered around. It's getting into the dough itself. The cheese that I embedded is starting to poke through, so you can see it, but it's embedded in the dough. So when this pizza bakes, it's going to actually bake into the dough, and it's going to change the texture of that crust. It's going to be like the most creamy, buttery crust you've ever had, but yet with a crisp undercrust, a really nice kind of almost like toffee-like undercrust. It's an amazing texture and flavor combination. But now we've got to turn this into a pizza. So this is just the base. This one we'll come back to in 4 hours. This one is ready to be topped and baked. So let's make a topping for it.